welcome to the studio review for Chapter 8. We are looking at concepts from both Chapters 7 and 8 today about strings and arrays. So this studio will cover both of those. There will be 3 parts. The very first part is just to focus on strings. How do we modify strings using different methods? And we'll also practice doing a little bit of user input for this. And then we're going to work with arrays and strings together, converting back and forth, to be able to identify different characters and, do some operations like reversing things and joining things back together. And then the bonus mission will be about multidimensional arrays. What happens when you have arrays inside arrays? So we'll do a little exercise for that as well. The first thing to note is that the code is in the JavaScript projects repo that you already have, and it's going to be in the directory arrays and studio. And then there's going to be 3 different files that we work with inside studio. We're going to start with stringmodification.js. It reminds you here not to forget to run npm-i or npm install. Those are the same thing. Within these directories. And you might wonder, how do I know when I'm supposed to do that and when I don't? And the answer is you only need to do it when you have dependencies. And when we are doing user input, for example, with our stringmodification.js file, you can see at the top, they've already got this variable here, input, to represent this readline sync library so that we can accept user input. This means we are going to need to install this dependency. So I'm in the arrays/studio directory already in my terminal. I navigated there with the change directory command, cd. And so I can go ahead and do npm-i, or you can type out install if you would like to. And you'll notice that it's going to start, adding the dependencies. So the way you can tell whether that's even needed is right here, you'll see a package.json file. And all it says is that, the dependencies are readline sync, and it tells what version. So because I had that, I thought, okay, I need to run npm-i. And then it created 2 things for me here, package.lock.json and node modules, which actually contains the library that's needed. Now, you may not have this looking quite like this in your version of VS Code where they're grayed out like this. The reason they're grayed out is because I actually went to the main repository getignore file down here, and I added these 2 lines here where it says, double asterisk basically means any directory, inside this entire repository. If you come across a node modules file, ignore it. So, don't treat that as something where we need changes to the repository for Git. Same thing with the package.lock.json. So basically, I'm telling Git to ignore anytime it runs across that directory or that file. It should just ignore it and not consider it for staging with Git. And the benefit of that is that those files always stay on your local machine, and they don't ever get staged and pushed to the remote repo on GitHub. And that's ideal because it's not necessary for those things to be on GitHub. It just causes extra files that have to be transferred back and forth. And they're also specific to your machine. So if you want to add that to your gitignore for this repository, I would highly suggest that you do. And then you won't have to worry about that ever in the future. The files will be here locally, but you won't have to worry about them being pushed back and forth. So that's why, here where we have the source control right now, it's not really showing anything that needs to be staged yet for Git because I haven't made any changes other than adding these and they're being ignored. Okay, so, but that's how you tell. If you have a package.json file, you need to run npm install, and then you'll see package lock and node modules pop up once it's installed successfully. And then you're good to go. Now we can actually use the readline sync library because we have done that install. Okay, so back to stringmodification.js. This is where we're going to put a code for this first part. Let's look at the instructions. They tell us here to remove the first 3 characters from a string and add them to the end. So they've given us a starter string of LaunchCode. And if we do what they're asking us to do and remove these first 3 characters, we get inch code lao. And so they want us to use a template literal to print both the original and the modified string in some sort of descriptive phrase. Okay, we know how to do this. We know how to take, slices of a string and concatenate them together. We also know how to do a template literal. These are things that we learned in chapter 7. So let's go over and do that. We'll start right here at the top. They have our string defined for us already to work with. So let's go ahead and under number 1 here, I'm going to say, let's create a modified string because, we need to actually store what the new result is because we can't just overwrite this. We could reassign it to string. I don't want to do that. I want to create a new variable. Okay, so if I want to modify this string, the slice method is a really good one because that allows us to take substrings from the entire string. And if we want to split these to where these characters here from the N to the E go first and the LAU are last, then I'm going to slice starting at index 3. So remember that strings are indexed, they're 0 index, which means we start with 0, 1, 2, 3. So that N is at 3. So if I say, let's take that original string and take a slice of it, start at index 3. And if I leave off the second parameter here, it assumes that you want to go all the way to the end. So I don't need to figure out what number index that last one is. I just can say start at index 3 and take everything from there to the end. Then we can concatenate together those first 3 characters. For this one, we do need to use both of the parameters available. And we're going to say, I want to start at index 0 and go up to, but not including index 3. And I know that this can be a little bit challenging to remember how this works when you're new at it. The way I like to think of it is I want a slice that is 3 characters long. So if the second one minus the first one equals 3, then I have done my job. I know I'm starting at 0 and I want 3 characters. So I'm going from 0 to 3. That's going to give me 0, 1, and 2, but not 3. So that's exactly what we want. So I can print that. And I can calculate that and create, this new modified string. But if I want to print it, I'm going to need to come down here and create a template literal. So I'm going to use console.log and just create this template literal right here. Remember that a template literal cannot use double quotes or quotes. The way you create it is with the backtick, which is up there on the top left side of your keyboard on the same button as the tilde. So you just use a backticks, and then in between that, you can compose your sentence exactly as you want it to read. So I can say the string, and then, let's say I want my string to go there. We'll just do that for now. And then I can say has been converted to, and then, I want my modified string to go here. And I'll put a period. Let's say I also want these to appear in, that was not what I wanted. To appear in single quotes, I can do that too. But what do I actually want here instead of blanks, right? This is a placeholder. What we need is a placeholder that JavaScript recognizes. So I'm going to use the placeholder with the $sign and the curly braces like this. And then I can actually have it evaluate a JavaScript variable or expression between those curly braces. And that's where I'm going to say, the original string has been converted to, and I'll do another JavaScript placeholder here. And in between those curly braces, I will put my modified string. Okay. And that is how we write a natural looking sentence and just use those placeholders to evaluate those variables and give us whatever values they hold. And this one, of course, already holds the string LaunchCode. This is the one that we're hoping is going to, switch the letters around and give us that modified string. So let's go ahead and run this. Right now, down here, I'm already in the studio directory, and the string modification.js is right here in this directory. I can verify that by using the ls command in the terminal. And I can see right there, I've got, all these files, and the last one here is string-modification.js. So I'm in the right place. I'll use the node command to have it actually run it as a JavaScript file. And it says the string LaunchCode has been converted to inch code lao. So we got exactly what we were looking for. Okay, that's great. Now let's look at number 2. It says modify your code to accept user input. And we can query the user to enter the number of letters that we relocated. So it's not necessarily going to be 3 characters. It might be a different amount of characters. No problem. Instead of modifying my code up here, what I'm going to do is actually just continue and do it again, but this time do it the way they want us to do it. That way, my solution code still has the original code from the first step. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say, let's create a variable to store the number of characters that the user, let's just call it user num. We'll keep it simple. That the user wants. And we are going to go ahead and use this variable up here. It's a constant that's been created to represent the readline sync library. So I am tapping into this library that already exists that has this functionality to be able to work with the console. So I can say input, let's go to that library and use the question method. And then all I have to do is give it the string to present to the user. So I'll say, how many characters should be moved? And I'm using single quotes here. I don't have to use single quotes. I could use double quotes if I want to. I'm going to add a space here so that in the console, the user's response is not right up against that question mark. It just makes it read a little bit easier. And then I'll put a semicolon on the end there. Okay. So what this is going to do, it has two functions. One is to print this out to the console so the user sees it and gives them a chance to respond. And the second part of this is that once they do respond, it's going to capture that response and store it in this variable user number. And then we can do something with that, right? So we'll allow them to tell us, and then we will go ahead and modify the string. So I can, I'm going to come all the way down here to the bottom because ultimately with step 3 here, we're going to do something else as well. So I'll come down here at the bottom and let's say, let the user modified string equal, and we can copy what we did up here. But instead of using 3 as this breaking point of, I want all the characters starting at that index and ending at that index, we can change it to use this variable user num. And no matter what the user gives us, we'll be able to slice it along those lines and combine it a little bit differently. Okay, now I can go ahead and have this template literal again. And this time I'm going to take this template literal that we wrote before, and I'm going to actually set it into a result. And it looks like I left off my beginning backtick there. All right, that looks good. So we have a result, and we can just console log the result that's been stored. Okay. And the reason I'm storing this in a variable will become evident in a little bit. But for now, we're just going to do this straight up and test it. So let's go ahead and, I do need to do one more thing. I need to change this to be the user modified string, right? Because this template literal up here was using the modified string where it was just using the 3. This one we created to store the user number split, and that's the one we actually want to be in this sentence. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a try. I'm going to run this again and hit the up arrow because I already put in the command node, and just run this again. And it says the string launch code has been converted to inch code loud. Okay, that's printing the original console log from line 9. So that's normal. But then right here on line 12 is where we actually asked how many characters should be moved. So that's the next thing that prints. We can respond, and let's do 5 characters this time, and I'll hit enter, and it continues, and it says the string launch code has been converted to code launch, which is a silly way of splitting that up, and an even sillier way of pronouncing it. But there you have it. You can see that it took the first 5 and the last 5 and switched them around. Okay, we have a problem though, because we have not had any way of, limiting what happens if the amount is not valid, right? Let's say launch code is 10 characters long. Let's say I said 12. It doesn't do anything. It just converts it to launch code because it can't really work with 12 characters. There is no index 12. So let's go over here and see what number 3 says. It says add validation to your code to deal with user inputs that are longer than the word. If that happens, they want us to have it default to moving 3 characters. And then also we want to make sure our template literal should make note of that error. So there's a couple things we'll need to do here to modify our code to allow for this. The first one is to just, take this user number that they've given us and evaluate it. Is it longer than the word itself? So we can come over, and I'm just going to create a Boolean to store this. And I'm going to say, let's assume that it's not too long until we evaluate it. So we'll set this to false. It's not too long until we check. So we'll say if the user num that they provided us is greater than the length of the string, then that's when we're going to say, you know what, too long is, it is too long. So we'll set that to true. And then they also told us that they wanted us to then just use the value 3 instead. So we'll change the value of user num from whatever they gave us to 3. And now we can work with that. So this line of code, this is why I put this line of code down here, is because we've changed it to 3 if this happens. And now it's just going to use 3 here instead of whatever they originally gave us. The second thing we're doing, and this is why I created too long, is it also said that we wanted to modify our result, right? The string has been converted to whatever. So let's say, and then I print it. Let's say, they did have a problem. They gave us something that was too long. We need to modify this result to say something about that. We're still going to give them this, but I'm going to tack something onto the end. So I'm just going to say if it was too long and we changed it to 3, then we're going to tell them that, right? So I'll just take the existing result, this one, and say, let's add to that. And I'm going to use this compound assignment operator plus equals to say, I also want a space. And then in parentheses, I want to say the number you provided was bigger than the length of the word. So we moved only the first 3 letters. Okay. And now result is going to be this plus that, and we'll print it. So if it's not too long, it's just going to skip this, right? That's the way conditionals work. If we set this to false initially, if this evaluates and says, nope, the user number was perfectly fine, it's actually not longer than the length, then it's just going to skip this. And it's going to continue on. It's going to use whatever number they provided. And it'll also skip this because too long is still false. And so it's just going to, do it the way we expected it to do it all along. But we've handled the case where it is a problem. So let's test it both ways. Anytime you have logic where one of 2 things can happen, you want to make sure that you test it both ways. So I'm going to just run it as is. And we'll say, let's move 7 characters. So this is the case where it's perfectly fine. So it says, no problem. The string launch code has been converted to ode launch. And so now we say, let's do it again. And this time I'll give it that 12 again that we tried before. And instead of, just doing from 0 to as long as it could and just giving us launch code, it's going instead to change it to 3. And it's going to tell us that it changed it to 3. So we have that result where we have the NCH, the last 3 letters, and then, let me say that again. We have the last 7 letters, and then we have the first 3 letters. And then we also have the statement that we tacked on saying, we moved only the first 3 letters because your number was too long. Okay, so that takes us all the way to the end of part 1. We have successfully modified our string, and we've handled this situation where if they give us a number that's too long, we can deal with that. Now let's look at array and string conversion. Okay, the first thing to note here is that we have a different directory where we are going to be working. They tell us to go to array string conversion directory, and we're going to need to run npm install again because there is a different package JSON file here, a whole different set of files, really. So you can see this is the directory array string conversion. Inside here, we've got a spec folder. And we have array testing.js and index.js and then package.json. So because this package.json lives inside this directory, this means we need to do an npm install inside this directory because this one has nothing to do with this one. They're two different sets of information for two different directories. So I'm going to come down here to my terminal and actually change directory into array string conversion. And you can see here, if I do an ls, that I've got, all these files, including the package.json. So I'll do npm I, and it's installing. Looks like it's taken a second here. We can go ahead and take a look at this package.json. You can see that it's got a little bit more going on than previously. It's got this jest, which is a testing suite. That's what that spec folder is for. We're going to learn more about that in chapter 14. But for now, you don't need to worry about all of that, but we do need to make sure it's in place. So we've run that. Looks like we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and look at this. Now, index.js might be the first place you look. And there is some code here where it's, saying I want to pull in some files from, some things from array testing, and it's, calling these functions. Now, you haven't learned about functions yet. That's okay. You don't need to know everything about functions. Just all you really need to know here is this is what's called calling a function. We're saying there's some code that is stored as part of this function, and we want to execute it. So we call it here. From this variable studio that is representing that entire file. So we aren't actually going to do any coding here. This is something they've done for you because they're going to go and they're going to run each of these functions. But they say here we should go to array testing.js to actually code. So I'll close this. If we come over here, we can see now we've got some instructions, and you can see where all these functions have been defined. And our code is going to go inside these functions, and then the other file is actually going to execute it. So there's 4 things we want to do here. Let's just talk about kind of what they're looking for. We are going to use split and join to convert things back and forth between strings and arrays. And this idea of a delimiter is, some sort of character or multiple characters that can allow you to split a string, and then you can, convert it back into a string with joining it. And we want to do 4 different types of things. We're going to reverse things that are, split by commas, and put dashes between things that have semicolons and things like that. But no matter which one it is, they want us to use this includes method just to see if those words are separated by, that particular thing. Or if it's just spaces or whatever. So each of these 4, though, parts 2 through 5 here, this is where there's these 4 different functions we're going to put some code inside. So we'll take them one at a time, and they give you some example strings that you're going to work with. And all of those have already been defined for you up here at the top. These are what we're going to be checking out. So the intention here is for us to use reverse commas to check this proto-array 1. We'll do semi-dash and check it with proto-array 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the first one we're going to do here is reverse commas. We are going to take a string and check to see if it is separated by commas. And if it is, we'll split it into an array. And then once we have each of those words as elements in an array, we can reverse them using the reverse method. And then we will join that reversed array back into a string with the join method. So we can use method chaining. We will do that here as part 2 right here. But first we have to work with these variables. Now, what they want you to do here is basically, say, okay, the thing we're checking for is a comma. So I'm going to make a string that's a comma, and that's how I'm going to instantiate this check variable. For output, there's a number of things you might do here. You might have just, set it to an empty string. I'm actually going to just set it equal to proto-array 1, because that's the one that I want to use this to test, because it's got commas in it. And we'll just start with that, but then we'll say, we'll do our logic and say, if it does include commas, then we want to reassign output to be the reversed string that we produce. So let's try doing that. We'll say, let's just go check output and say if it includes check, then we will reassign it and say, instead, we want output to now hold the value where we take output, we split it using that character that's stored in check. Then now that it's an array, we reverse it. And now that the elements have all been reversed, we join that array back by that same check, that comma, because that's what they want us to do here. All the words are separated by commas. When we finish, it should still be separated by commas, but they should be in reverse order, which this example shows that. So for this, that means we would expect to see 12, 9, 6, and 3. Okay, if we want to test this, we can do that by running the unit tests that they have put in here for us. So we can actually just make sure you're in this directory and do npm test. And it's going to run them. And it's going to say that 3 failed and 1 passed. And that's correct because we haven't done the other 3 yet, right? And it's testing for all 4 of them. But if we look here at the list of things, the 3 that are not passing are the ones that we haven't done yet. But right here, you'll see a little green check mark next to strings at index 0. That's referring to, right here in line 6, this array strings, proto array 1 at index 0. So it tested that one and, saw that, yes, it is in fact producing 12, 9, 6, 3 instead of 3, 6, 9, 12. So that is great. We are on the right track. Now all we have to do is continue working on these other ones. Okay, so the next one is the semi-dash function. It says if the string uses semicolons instead of commas, we want to split it into an array, but instead of reversing it, we're going to alphabetize. That means using sort. And then we'll join it back together. But when we join it, we're not going to join it by semicolons. We're going to join it by hyphens. So we're mixing it up a little bit. We'll set this up, though, the same way that we did before. So we're going to make the check a semicolon. That's what we're looking for. And then we'll set this to be proto array 2 because that's the string that has the semicolons in it. And then we'll just say, okay, if output includes check, we can do this the same way we did before. Then we want output to be reassigned to output.split on the check. And then here, it said we wanted to alphabetize. So I'm going to use sort, and that should reorder all of the elements in the array that was created by split. And now that they've been sorted, I can chain on one more and say join. But we don't want to join by the check this time because it said to join by hyphen instead. So we'll just hard code that right there as a hyphen. And then that's been reassigned. Now it should return the output. Okay. So again, we can run npm test and we should see that 2 tests are passing now. And they are. Yep, we've got both of the first 2 are passing. Great. Okay. The third one, reversed spaces. This one says, if spaces are used, we want to split it, reverse alphabetize, and then join back into a space separated. So this is going to look a lot more like reverse commas, but we also want to alphabetize. So, and it says reverse alphabetize. So we're going to have to think about what order we do things for the chaining to make sure it comes out right. I'm going to go ahead and copy this part of the code and just replace that. And then here we're checking for a space for this one. Otherwise, this code pretty much holds up. The difference is we want to alphabetize it first and then reverse it. So right in here, I'm going to add one more method and chain it in there to where we split it into an array, sort them, then reverse them, and then join them back together by that same character, which is the space. And then that should work. Okay, let's run our test. And it says 2 passed. Okay, something's not quite right. Oh, I know why. Because I did not set this equal to proto array 3. That's what I get for copying and pasting. Yeah, we actually want this one to be the one we're testing for this. So let's do this again. There we go, 3 passing, great. So it looks like that one is good. Our last one says comma space. Okay, what if a string has both commas and spaces separating all of the words? So we want to do this similar to the way the second one was done, so that no extra spaces are used. So let's go to this one. Yeah, let's go to this one and say the check is actually going to be comma and space. And we'll set this one equal to proto array 4. And then we'll do something similar to the way the first one has been done here with the reversing. Where we split it and we reverse it and then we join it back. But in this case, they don't want us to join it by the space, comma space. They want us to just join it with a single comma. So I'm just going to hard code that instead of using what's been stored in this variable up here. Okay, let's give that a run. Let's come up down here and do npm test again. Let me get this here. Perfect. Okay, all 4 of them are now passing. This is what we like to see. So that means that all 4 of these are working as intended, and we're good to go. Again, if you got a little bit turned around by all the extra code here that you haven't learned how to read yet, that's totally okay. You know, all you had to do was put a few lines of code inside these functions and everything was set up to run for you otherwise. So there you go. All right. So that's it for the first 2 parts. The last bit was a bonus mission. If you had time to get to this, I hope you did. You may have struggled with it a little bit because it's kind of next level, but it's worth getting into because this sort of thing is done pretty often where you're working with more complex data structures. So we want to look at this idea of array having other arrays as its elements. So if we switch over here, we're done with string modification and array testing. We actually want to go to this file, multidimensional arrays. And that means that I'm going to need to cd backwards. So I'm going to do a cd ... down here in my terminal. And that's going to take me back to arrays/studio, where you can see our multidimensional arrays file is. Okay. So we'll be in good shape to run that in a minute. Okay, now let's take a look at this. They've given us some starting information where they've got these strings that are comma separated with each of these items. They would like for us to use split to actually create arrays that hold each of these as separate elements. And we just learned how to do that, right? You'll notice here something that is a little bit different, though, is that these examples they give here actually have comma and space, but the way that you see them in the starter code, there is no space, it's just commas. So we're gonna have to pay attention to that when we split to make sure we're splitting on the right delimiter. And then they want us to create an array and actually put all 4 of the arrays that we create here inside that array, and we'll print it to make sure that it looks the way we're expecting. So let's just do those first 2 steps, and then we'll kind of see what's next. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to give these good names. We have food, equipment, pets, and sleep aids. All we're basically doing is taking these and converting them from strings to arrays. So I'm just going to say let food array equals food.split, and we'll split on the comma, and then alphabetize, we'll sort. Okay. We can do the exact same thing for all 4 of these. Here, instead of food, we'll have equipment array. Wow. There we go. equipment. Okay, this one will have pets array and we'll split pets. And on this one, we'll do sleep aids array and split sleep aids on the comma. So all of them need to be split on the same delimiter, just the comma, and then sorted to alphabetize them. Okay, so then part 2 says initialize a cargo hold array. Okay, so I'll create a new variable, cargo hold. And you could, just initialize it like this as an empty array and then say, cargo hold dot push and put, food array, equipment array, et cetera, et cetera. That's perfectly fine. You can also do it like this, where you go ahead and just initialize it with those arrays inside them already. And so pets array and sleep aids array. Okay. And make sure you're putting in the arrays and not the original strings, because otherwise we won't be working with an array of arrays. We'll be working with an array of strings. Okay. They want us to verify it and take a look at the structure by printing it. So we'll print cargo hold and take a look at this. So I'm going to say node multidimensional arrays .js. Again, I'm in array/studio, so I'm right where this is. Okay, and now we see it. We have the whole array here is represented by the beginning and end bracket here and here, but you can see that there's 4 elements inside this array, and each of them is an array itself, and each of those has its own set of 4 strings that are its elements. So this is a multidimensional array, an array of arrays. Okay, we want to ask the user to select the cabinet from 0 to 3, which of course makes sense because that represents the indices that are inside an array of 4 items. So we're going to need to get input here. So we're going to need to come up here and say const input equals require readline sync. Okay. Now this is a dependency. We talked about this at the beginning. I do not need to do another npm install because we're back in the same directory where we did that for string modification, which means it's already available. We have the package lock and the node modules here. It has it. It's available to this file. All I need to do is declare the constant up here so that we can use it in this file. But I don't need to like reinstall the dependencies or anything like that. Okay, so we can use this now, input. I'm going to create a new variable to store the user's input. We'll say let user num. So I'm going to start with input and ask the question. And I'll use a template literal so that we can do this nice and clean all at once and make it look exactly the way we want it to look. I'm going to actually make this look, really formatted and, give the user something really nice to look at. I'm going to say, please choose a cabinet and then give them the choices. And I'll say, 0 is food and 1 is equipment. Now, when you were doing this, if you just, said, please choose a number from 0 to 3, that's totally okay too. But something you can think about is, how do you want the user to experience your application? And this is, a very nice way of presenting this so they know exactly what it is that they're being offered. So we say, please choose a cabinet 0, 1, 2, and 3. And then we tell them what that represents. And you may or may not have to do something like this for your graded assignment. I'm just saying this would be a nice way to do it. Okay, so now we can actually, evaluate or get that number from them, and then we'll be able to make use of it to choose the cabinet that they want. So let's go just look at these instructions. It says we want to use bracket notation and a template literal to display the contents of the selected cabinet, but if the user entered an invalid number, we need to print an error message instead. So we're going to do a little bit of validation here to see if it's possible to choose that cabinet, or is that number out of range, because they might give us something other than 0 to 3. So I'm going to create, selected cabinet because eventually we're going to want to store something in this. But let's actually do a little bit of, checking here. If the user number is less than 0, or if the user number is greater than 3, it's going to be out of range. So then we'd want to, say something back to them like, that is not a valid cabinet number. On the other hand, if it's all okay, then we'll do this instead. We'll say else. Let's take that selected cabinet and go to the cargo hold and use bracket notation to look up which cabinet it is that they're looking at based on the number they selected. Just like that. And then we'll just print that for them, the selected cabinet. Okay. So again, what we're doing here is taking the number that the user provides when we ask them for one of these numbers, and we are checking to see that it's in range. If it's not in range because it's less than 0 or greater than 3, we'll tell them, that's not valid. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and use it. And we'll actually use that as the index of the cargo hold array here that has all 4 cabinets in it, and go get the one that is at that index and store it in selected cabinet. And then we can just print that for them. So let's try this out. All right, it says, please choose a cabinet. I'm going to choose 2. And it shows me the pets: alien eggs, cats, moose, and parrots. Okay, let's run it again. And this time I'm going to do something out of range so we can test the opposite. You always want to test, both sides of any sort of, condition like this where it could turn out one way or it could turn out another. I'm going to choose a number that's greater than 3. I'll choose 5. And it says that is not a valid cabinet number. Okay. And then it exits the program, and that's okay. You're going to learn in the future how to actually keep asking over and over again until they get it right, but we haven't learned that yet. So for now, we'll just exit the program. Okay. So then it says, you can modify this code to query the user for both the cabinet and the cargo hold and a particular item. And then, just double check, is that item actually in that cabinet? And if it is, you would say cabinet does contain the item. And if it doesn't, then you could say, this cabinet does not contain the item. Okay, so we need a little bit more logic, and we also need to get more user input. So let's go take a look at this. We can really allow things to proceed as they have already, where we ask them for the cabinet. But what we might want to do is actually continue this and say, we're only going to allow this to happen, letting them ask for a specific item if it was a valid cabinet number. So I'm actually going to move this up here inside my else block, because I want to only put this code in here and let it execute if it's a valid number. Okay, so here inside the else block, I will say let selected item, and that'll be what the variable we store their response in, and we'll say input.question, what item would you like from that cabinet? Because we've already displayed the cabinet for them, the contents at this point, so that they can see what is there for the taking. So we'll ask them and let them answer back. And then we're going to print that, sentence back here, cabinet, whatever does or does not contain. And I think what I want to do, this whole idea of managing, is it does or does not, we could actually set this with some text and say, let contains text. And we'll just say, let's start with does. And we'll only add on the not if it's not there. So we'll check for that. If not selected cabinet. So notice I'm using that bang symbol up here to negate this, because I'm not using an equality operator. I'm actually using includes, which is going to return true or false. So we're going to look and see if it includes it, and then we're saying if it doesn't include it. So we'll check this selected item. And if it does not include it, then we're going to take that contains text that currently says does, and we're going to tack on to it with the additive and assignment here and say space not. And then now it'll say does not. Okay. And then we can continue and just print the final statement. So I'll do a template literal again here because we have some variable text that we need to fill in. So we need placeholders. Okay, I'm going to say cabinet, and we'll say contains text. And then contain. So it either does contain or it does not contain. Selected item. Okay. So we need to test this a little bit, right? We'll run this, and first we'll choose, let's say cabinet 1 this time. So it displays it for us: jetpacks, spacesuits, thermal detonators, and tool belts. So first let's test it with something that is there. We'll say spacesuits. And it says cabinet does contain spacesuits. Good. Okay, so we got our does and our spacesuits there, inserted with those placeholders. Let's try it again. And this time, let's do sleep aids. I'll do cabinet 3. And it says alarm clocks, blankets, eye patches, and pillows. Well, what if I say parrots? Cabinet does not contain parrots. Okay, so that means our logic is working. We are, checking to see if it includes it, and modifying the language if it does not, and then producing the sentence that's required. Okay, that is all there is to it. Definitely start to try to get comfortable with doing these kinds of things. As you get into graded assignments 1 and 2, you're going to be working with arrays and working with, using variable indices like this, and accessing information, and then displaying things to the user using template literals like this. So you're going to want to get comfortable with this kind of thing where you are combining your variables and your logic with user input, and producing a little program that's interactive in the console. This is kind of be your first step to working toward being able to build a website, is being able just to interact with something as simple as text. So I hope you had fun with this, and I will see you in the next one.